you did early experiments in computer-generated animation, and you brought along a strip of 60mm film to show us. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah. I hope everyone knows what 16mm magnetic film looks like. Well, in the late 1960s, I had this. I had a computer that was a time-sharing computer. So the main computer was in Chicago, and there was a link, a transatlantic link, that linked it to the office in, I think it was in Stratton Street, and we had this teletype and a computer, and all the computing was done in BASIC, you know, on this particular machine. Although
I don't know if many people are going to know what BASIC is.
All right, well, it's the simplest computer language that was sort of kind of came up in the 60s. It was invented in Dartmouth College in, I can't remember which state, in Maryland or somewhere like that, for the Naval College, and it's a very sort of basic system for programming computer. Anyway. You didn't have sort of kind of punch cards to input information into this computer, nor did you have disks or anything like that. If you wrote a program and you wanted to save that program that was written, you put it into a punch tape it was punch tape reader, which would read tape but also punch the tape. So if you use a teletype, you could you know, the cow flew over the moon or whatever it is. You type all of that in. And then you would send that information to this punch tape. And then what this was, well, sorry, jumping the gun a bit here. I put in this magnetic tape, magnetic film, 60mm magnetic film, that you normally put into a printer, you know, that is for carrying audio signals. I put that through this punched, computer punch, and it would punch out all these holes. And what this is a print made from that as a mask.
So that's kind of a negative made from that punch tape.
Yeah. And I used this in a film called St Paul's Cathedral movie, 1972, and each of these little black holes was, you know, make a negative of it. So the black hole would be a white hole and would become transparent, and I would show another image inside the hole. So it was a way of using basic sort of bipack mask.
I'd be very interested if you do get round to scanning those remaining strips of it to do a little QuickTime movie and maybe put it on the YouTube channel. So I think that's absolutely fascinating.
The other thing that we used at London Filmmakers Co-op was this Debris contact printer, which is a very, very old French printer. And it's not like, you know, if you went to a film lab where you get something, you know, something printed where it would be like from a sort of continuous printer, which would run at like 120 feet a minute, which was very, very fast. It didn't have a, you know, it had a gape, it didn't have a claw, but you actually had a sort of like a registration pin that came out. So it was a bit similar to a sort of a camera. And you'd get inside this little cubicle at London Filmmakers Co-op. It was all blacked out, of course, because if you're printing stuff in colour, and you'd have this sort of clattering machine that would go like this, and because it was printing at 16 frames a second. So it did take you quite a bit of time to actually print your film. But what I did with this was that you know, I put the magnetic stock into the printer, so it went all through the gauges and path, you know, the printer path, and then it would print this out. And then I think I probably processed this also at the Filmmakers Co-op. I had a big processing tank. Sorry, that was a bit tortuous.
Jumping ahead a bit, you told me some time ago that you had a hiatus from filmmaking.
Oh right, yes, I was.
And then you came out the other side using a different technique. Do you want to just tell us very quickly about that? You told me many years ago that you stopped making films at one point because the funding wasn't available anymore from the Arts Council.
Well, you know, I had a house in Lincoln. I bought, you know, I had a mortgage and things like that, and then you know, then I was suddenly on the dole, you know, because the money ran out. I wasn't getting any grants, and the work was running out. I'd done some teaching at Trent Polytechnic for about 5 or so years. And then I had to go back to college again, so I came down to London. My mum was living in London, and I went to PCL, you know, Polytechnic of Central London, and I did postgrad in electronics and computer technology, and got a job and got some money in.
But then you came out of the other side of this horrific state of affairs.
Yes,
a
and
few
I
years later,
yes, I
didn't
didn't
you?
go to jail, and I wasn't in a lunatic asylum for 16 years. So, you know, there's a sort of like a 10-year period where I was making films from about 1970 up to 1980, and then nothing from 1980 till 1995 or 1996. Then this person here said, I'm not going to go around with a guy who's not doing films. You've got to do something, you know. I just wanted to sit in the corner and be drunk, you know.
You said, I'm going to buy a computer.
No, I didn't. No, I was quite, because I used to work, I had a, you know, for about 5 years I had a well-paid job working for the Department of Trade and Industry. I was in a firm of accountants, and they needed a data processing manager. And I had enough money to sort of kind of basically retire on that, and I just thought, well, what can a guy like me do? I can just sit in the corner and get drunk, which I was about to do, and then Rosemary said, no, back to the grindstone, some video.
It's just that the computer, your knowledge of computers and your knowledge of films actually converge, don't
You're
they?
right.
So, you know,
That's the
you've
bit I forgot, you see, because you said
got these two things that you've got expertise in, suddenly you could use both of them in one go.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's partly it, isn't it?
Yes, it's, you know.
It's just actually what was possible,
Yeah.
because you knew about those two things, but now they actually
Yeah.
belong together.
Because in the 70s, you know, I knew about sort of digital coding and programming and so forth, but I was using an analog system. The computer printer was analog, so all the sort of kind of automatic cutting and switching that I did in my films in the 70s was all done using masks and done in a totally analog way. Whereas today, or rather since, you know, the computer software has been available for doing it, it's all digital and it's great, you know. And you know, I wouldn't say I can do what I want, but I can do things a lot better now than I could 30 or 40 years ago.
Now, when people were coming in, we were showing on a loop a film you made called Codex, which was the last 10 minutes of a 60-minute experimental film you made on 16mm. Do you want to say a bit about how that relates to your current films before we show some of the recent stuff?
Yeah, I suppose it's sort of, I'm very interested in what I think in animation is called auto-switching, which is an automatic way of doing sort of the equivalent of, in film of A, B, C, D roll, of running several films together and kind of cross-cutting them very, very fast. Because for me, I'm interested in my eyeball getting kind of tweaked while I'm watching something, and I need to excite myself, and if I can't excite myself from looking at the thing, I can't expect to excite anyone else. So I don't know, that probably doesn't answer your question, does it?
No, it does. It does help. Well, I'll show about a minute of that film again, just to give you the context before we show the more recent stuff. And just to sort of round things up, I said of your work a while ago that you were very interested in using the found image.
Yeah.
Nowadays, rather than an image from a magazine, it would be something you find online, and that's particularly noticeable in Kaleidoscopics, and I think it's She's Not There. I think it's She's Not There. Do you want to say a little bit about your kind of reusing and repurposing of images?
Well, yeah, you know, you get a DVD. There are ways of ripping the MPEG files from a DVD, and you know. Some of the films I've been looking at recently has been this Antonioni film, L'Avventura.
That's what you showed me earlier on.
And yeah, basically when I was a kid at school, I was about 16, 17. I went to see L'Avventura about 1960. And I wrote to Antonioni in Rome. And so, you know, to Monica Vitti, care of Michelangelo Antonioni, Roma, Italy. And I got a reply with photographs signed by Monica Vitti, which I have somewhere, but I can't find it. I'm going to make a video.
Well, in your retrospective exhibition, I want to see them.
But anyway, you know that you can obviously sort of kind of hack DVDs and I think Blu-rays too. I haven't done it with Blu-rays, but
Grab them off the television.
and you can also grab them off the TV. You know.
And what is your purpose in taking images and changing their meaning and
I'm not even sure I'm changing their meaning. I mean, it's just something that you know. If it's something that I like and I find interesting, yeah, that I want to use it. And
so it's instinctive. More.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think when people see the stuff that's on there, it's just that the stolen stuff is used in completely different ways. It's not uniform at all.
The
It depends
first-
what the image is. Doesn't it?
The first
so
film-
reverberations in time is quite
Oh, right,
different
okay.
than Monica Vincent.
Oh right, yeah. Reverberations in time because of the Iraq War. I sort of really got caught up with being really extremely angry with Tony Blair and what was happening in this country. And so from when he was running around the country trying to sort of talk up the idea of weapons of mass destruction and so forth, and a war with Iraq is essential, blah blah blah, and then sort of moving in with George Bush, I thought, well, I'm going to make a number of videos of interviews with Blair and things that were on TV, and one of these videos is called Reverberations in Time, and it's the one where it's the election of Blair in 2005, and he's being interviewed by Jeremy Paxman. And he's been sort of asked about the Iraq War, and finally it gets to the end, and he's asked, does he accept any responsibility for the death of Dr. David Kelly? And Blair goes, and I heard this sort of big sigh of this, and then suddenly I thought of a story I read years and years before called, I can't see the title in German, it was by Heinrich Böll, called the Dr. Merker and His Collection of Silences. And what Dr. Merker did was, he was a psychoanalyst, and he got a bit tired in the evening of the cases that he was dealing with, and he'd recorded them all on tape. So what he did when he'd finished with those tapes was he cut the tapes up, and he took not what people said, but he took the silences between what they said and made a big tape of that, and then played that tape as a relaxation tape. And so if you see Reverberations in Time, we do show you'll see the connection with that.
Okay. Well, that brings us more or less up to date. I think, why don't we have a 2-minute break before I start showing the first tranche of films. But can I have a big round of applause for Stuart Pound?